Okay, good morning, everyone. Um, we'll go straight into our Tefillah course and discuss the next bracha. Actually, I wanted to complete two things regarding the previous bracha we had done last week. T'kabe shofar gadol lecherutenu, kibbutz galuyot. So we elaborate over this bracha and what does it mean, shofar gadol, and that the main emphasis is kapitzenu yachad me'abakan fotaretz. That not only should we gather back to our homeland, but we should also be united. So those are points that we spoke about already. I just want to add two short points before we go on to the next bracha. One is that the bracha ends off by saying, Baruch atah Hashem mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. The word nidchei, we didn't explain enough last week. It could have said mekabetz amo Yisrael, that Hashem with gathers back to our homeland the people of Israel, the nation of Israel. Why say nidchei amo Yisrael? So nidchei means those that are very, very far away. Those that are almost disconnected totally from Am Yisrael, even they will have the opportunity to return back to our homeland and to our people, to our Jewish people. So I saw by Rav Aviner, he explains this as meaning the 10 tribes, the 10 lost tribes. All of us are mainly made of Yehuda, Binyamin, and Levi. Those 3 tribes are the ones that are now relevant to us. We all came from those 3 tribes. The 10 tribes, we still have 10, by the way, because Menashe and Ephraim are 2. So there are actually 13 tribes, as we've said several times. So there are 10 tribes which were lost after the first destruction of the first temple. A little bit before then, they were exiled far away. And Yirmiyahu, who was the main prophet at the days of the destruction, he tried bringing them back, but he wasn't successful. And ever since, we've lost track of them. So we have Michael Freund from our community here, who deals with such hopefully Jews, who he's finding all over the world by noticing their customs and the way they do things that remind us of Jewish tradition. Like the Bnei Menashe is famous for bringing them, helping them make Aliyah. The people from India, who supposedly maybe from the tribe of Menashe, and also the Ethiopian Jews, long time back already, the days of the Radbaz. We're talking about 500, 600 years ago. They already detected the Jewish tradition held by the Ethiopians, and he wrote that he thinks they're from the tribe of Dan. So we're slowly finding the lost tribes all over the world, different tribes actually living all over the world, scattered around, and those are the Nidchei Amo Yisrael. Not only those who are definite Jews and we know their whereabouts and we know where they come from, European, American, Moroccan, or many such place, Yemenite, those are Amo Yisrael. But even the Nidchei, even those who were almost cut away from the Jewish people, even they will return to our homeland. And one last point, which we forgot to discuss, and that is, speaking of tribes, which tribe would be most relevant and resembled by this bracha of kibbutz galuyot? It's also not a simple one. It's not an easy one to figure out. my feeling is that it's best connected to Gad, Shevet Gad, and that is due to the fact that they were the ones who, in the course of the journey in the desert, after the Jews had left Egypt and made their journey towards Eretz Yisrael for the 40 years, Dan was Me'asef Lechol HaMachanot. It was the last tribe that walked last online on the journey, taking the journey. And what did that mean? That meant that all the lost and found objects, they would return to the people because they walked last. They found everything that people dropped by mistake on the way. They found it and bring it back to them. And even individuals, people who were tired of walking and they were sort of left behind, so Shevet Dan would help them continue the journey. So really, Dan is the one that's like the one to gather everyone and put them back into track towards Eretz Yisrael, lead them towards Eretz Yisrael. So that's the kibbutz galiot element of bringing the Jews, helping them come on a journey to make it back to Israel. That could be the resemblance to Shevet Dan. So by this, we've completed this bracha. Let's do a little bit more further to get into to start the next bracha. The next bracha is justice, mishpat. Okay, so we say, Ashiva shofeteinu keva rishona, ve'yotzenu keva techila, ve'aser imenu yagon va'anacha. Umloch aleinu meira, ata Hashem levadcha, bechesed u'berachamim, b'tzedek u'b'mishpat. Baruch ata Hashem, melech ohev tzedakah u'mishpat. Okay, so this is all about judges and judging and justice, that we're looking forward to the time when Hashem will return the true judges to us, and we should judge by the Torah, by the laws of the Torah. Now, this is a bracha that's very, very, very relevant in our days, because we have a justice system in Israel. We have a very sophisticated and strong, some say too strong, of a system, with everything going to the Bagats and them deciding everything, whether it being political, whether it being religious. Some say that it's exaggerated, but we definitely have a system that's built, structured from bottom to top, with many, many judges and courts and everything functioning. But the sad story about this is that it's not at all based on the Torah. We're lacking the judges basing their judgment on Torah law. Unfortunately, most of them have never even encountered or haven't studied or haven't learned, are not exposed to Torah law. And that's a big, big shame, because in our homeland, mainly if we were living in Chutz La'aretz, so we can't help it. They have their system and we have to go by the Goy system, even though there were private courts all over in America today. They still have them in Europe. They still have Jewish private courts, where if two people in dispute decide to go to a private court, they're entitled to, even by the law of the land. There's permission to go to a court that's ruled by a certain religion or different type of system. It can always be overruled by an official court of the state, but at least if they both agree to to be judged by a certain private court, they could do so. Here in Israel, it's also an option. There's an option, like an arbitrator court, which can judge according to Torah. We have Batei Din leMamonot. We have Batei Din leIshut. The word Beit Din is used as a term that's used for a religious court, versus Beit Mishpat, which is a civil court. So there is an option of going to a religious court, a Jewish religious court, but unfortunately, most of the population in Israel, including the religious population, opts to go to the official state courts, use that system. Now, I must say that it's extremely problematic. I know I'm getting into a very sensitive discussion now, so I'll just say it in a few words. In Siman Kaf Vav in Choshen Mishpat, which is the section of Shulchan Aruch discussing monetary issues and how to judge and how to rule with monetary issues according to Torah, in Siman Kaf Vav 26, the Shulchan Aruch quotes from Chazal, "Ve'ele ha'mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem ve'lo lifnei akum, lifneihem ve'lo lifnei hedyotot." Meaning, the Torah commands us, bring the cases, the court cases, to a religious court, to a court that judges according to Torah. Ve'ele ha'mishpatim. These are the laws. And that's, by the way, the Parsha Mishpatim is the one that's filled mostly with many halach, the monetary halachos of Torah. Parshas Mishpatim. So the Torah is telling us, make sure you take your cases, your court cases, to the proper judges, those who judge according to Torah. And not in front of Akum, which is Goyim, and not in front of laymen, Hedyotot, those who are unfamiliar with Torah law. Now, so first of all, this is a Doraita instruction. The Torah instructs us from the Torah. It's a mitzvah to follow this rule of going to religious judges, those who know Torah and judge by the Torah. By the way, it doesn't matter if the judge is religious. It matters according to what he judges. Where does he take his ruling from, his laws from? That's what matters. Doesn't matter if he has a kippah or doesn't. If he's taking his laws and judging according to Torah, then that's fine. If he's not, it doesn't matter if he's a religious person. Now, another point is that this is in the Gemara also. The Gemara tells us, and it's written in the Shulchan Aruch, even in a case where by coincidence there is a civil law that fits and goes by Jewish law and is similar to what the Jewish law would rule on the same case, if the judge is not taking it from Torah, rather he's taking it from the British, Ottoman, American, German, you name it, law system, even though the final judgment is the same, he's not considered as following Torah, because he has to base his judgment on Torah. Only then is it considered as fulfilling enemies. We don't take from other systems. We should not be taking from any other system our laws, our judgments. Now, the very harsh wording of the Shulchan Aruch based on Chazal, and even more so the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish has a very famous line on this topic, is that there's no greater Chilul Hashem than judging not according to Torah. No greater Chilul Hashem. Why? Because Hashem gave us the Torah filled with relevant. You can't say that the laws of the Torah are not relevant. We have big Talmidei Chachamim that can derive from the Torah every single most modern case that appears in front of them, and they can judge according to Torah. You find that's miraculous, and we find in this ancient Torah that was written thousands of years ago, and the development of Torah Shebe'al Peh, how we find every ruling, every judgment relevant to modern day and age. Everything is there. You just have to search for it and learn deeply and have vast knowledge. So there's no excuse that the system is an old system and we need something more modern. It's not an excuse. We need to get to the bottom of Torah perspective of everything, and that's a true way to judge. There are very few topics that the legal system of the Torah cannot deal with in our days. And what is that? That's when it has to do with plilim, criminal, thank you. Criminal law. That's not possible to judge by Torah law nowadays yet, because we don't have a Sanhedrin. And we don't have the Beit Din of 23 judges, which are those who are ordained, smuchim, from passed down from rabbi to student, rabbi to student, all the way down the line from the days of the Tanaim and Amoraim period. We don't have that anymore. We don't have smicha yet. We have smicha, but we don't have the smicha of being ordained as a judge that can rule for criminal law. So criminal law specifically is an example where we can't use Torah at all. There's no way to use the Torah today, and therefore we're allowed to use civil law. That specific topic. So if everyone is planning on practicing law, they should try to aim towards criminal law. There are a few other topics, law topics that would be okay to for example, ta'avura, all the issues of road accidents and transportation law. That's also fine to be in that area of law of civil law, because that's something that the Torah accepts the law of the land. That's what we call dina de melchuta dina. The Torah doesn't say anywhere that if it's a red light, you have to stop the car and not continue driving. Not written anywhere in Chazal or in the Torah. But it's obvious that the Torah left that for the country, the government, the ruling of the land to decide how to make sure that the people are safe as they're driving, the speed, the red light, everything else, all the other laws of transportation or driving. The Tavura is also an area of law that one can practice, even if it's based on secular law. But most of the legal aspects of our life have to be based on Torah, and there are rulings in the Torah that we find, if we delve deep enough into it, and we have vast knowledge of all the poskim, that we can always get to the bottom line of judgment. There are cases where it's almost like the worst situation of using secular law and not Torah law. And that is, for example, when we talk about Yerusha, inheritance law. Yeah. That's something that's totally different from Torah perspective and the more modern civil way of looking at it. Although, if someone writes a will before they die, and the will is also has to be written according to Torah law. Sometimes there are phrases, there's wording that has to be used that it should apply, that it should work for according to Torah as well. But if it's done properly according to Torah, so the will really takes care of everything, and then it doesn't matter what the law is, because even the Torah respects a person's will. The person who had died had instructed what to do with their money or possessions. It has to be done that way if it was written according to Torah. But otherwise, it's a totally different system. According to Torah, a wife of a man does not inherit anything from him, rather the children do. And not all children, only the boys. And the eldest boy, if there's a Berachot, gets double. All this is totally different than the system today. And the post can speak about it, that the person did not write a will and died. And then, for example, his wife receives inherits most of his possession as it is by civil law, then actually she's stealing. According to Torah law, she's holding on to money or to possessions or to land that's not hers. And it's very problematic. Imagine a person who's a thief, even though they're receiving it legally. It's illegally. And why don't we say, I'll just finish off with this last understanding, which I've seen many people make mistakes basing their law practice and and using the system. It's not only if you're a lawyer or a judge, it's also if you're just a civilian who wants to go to sue someone legally. You should not go to a civil court. You have to go to a Beit Din, religious Beit Din, rule according to Torah. Only if you try 3 times to summon the person that you're suing and he refuses to come, only then does the Beit Din, the religious Beit Din, give you permission. It's called Tav Seruv. They give you a document that permits you to then sue that person in the civil court. Then you're allowed to go to the civil court. And also, if you're sued by someone and he takes you to civil court, you're allowed to defend yourself in a civil court. You don't have to just give up because it's in the civil court. If you're the one being sued, so it's not, you haven't chosen to go there and you can defend yourself. You don't have to lose the case just because it's a civil court. It's only if you're the one suing, then you have to make sure not to go to the civil court. Anyway, just one last line about this topic, that many religious lawyers, judges, or again, civilians who sue people in civil court, they base their occupation, their whole life, on the fact that Dina Malchuta Dina covers all of these issues, it takes care of all these problems, because the moment the law of the land is such, so the Torah permits us, by the concept of Dina Malchuta Dina, meaning the law of the land is the law of the Torah, so the Torah permits us to rule and judge and practice the law of the land. But that's completely wrong. The Rashba, very famous Rashba, and it's quoted in the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah, no one argues on this point, that Din Malchuta Dina only applies in cases where there's a vacuum. Like we said before, Ta'avura, transportation law, criminal law, where there's a vacuum, where there's no Torah perspective to what's being judged, what's being ruled, then Din Malchuta Dina. But if it contradicts Torah law, then there's no such thing, Din Malchuta Dina. Why should the law of the land be more powerful and instruct us to do things against the Torah? That can't be. The Rashba speaks very like in an amusing way. He says, if it was so, then let's tear and rip all the sections of Torah that deal with monetary law and monetary issues, because we have Din Malchuta Dina. Who needs them? Why have a whole section of Shulchan Aruch called Choshen Mishpat if it's not relevant in every land, every country? There's a law of the land. The Rashba says that can't be. And by the way, he spoke specifically of a takana. There was a ruling in where he lived, or where the person asking the question lived, where they gave the permission back in the days of the Rashba, 800, 750 years ago. It was like considered like a modern concept that they permitted girls to inherit. In that country, they gave the equal inheritance to girls as to boys. And the Rashba was asked, would this also apply to the Jews living in that country, that their girls should inherit? The Rashba says, no way. Don't obey, don't listen to them, don't accept it, because it's not Din Malchuta Dina. If it were Din Malchuta Dina, so what's the point in the whole Torah? So that's something that's very important to understand, and I have no idea, really have no idea How come there's so many religious boys and girls who go into law? And it's a very, very common Hezri Yeshivas boys who finish Hezri and go into law, and girls who finish Midrashot and very learned, and yet they choose to become lawyers. And even judges is even worse. Unless maybe what Professor Menachem Elon did, which was very unique, very rare. Professor Menachem Elon was an ultra-religious person who knew all the Torah, he knew a lot of Torah. He wrote 3 volumes of what's called Mishpat Ivri, 3 volumes of summarizing the Jewish religious laws in a way that, in a language that fits modern day and age. Because to learn today's Shulchan Aruch is not the modern way we study law. So he wrote it in a modern way. 3 volumes of the most of many halachos of Choshen Mishpat, of monetary law. And what he did personally, he skipped from being in academia. He was a professor, doctor of law, lecturing in universities. Direct from that, he skipped straight to the Supreme Court. He never went through the system. He was never a lawyer. He was never a judge in the Bet Mishpat Shalom, Bet Mishpat Mechozi, which usually that's how you climb up the stages. He went straight, directly from being a professor in university, straight to the Supreme Court. And that's the only way to do it, because in the Supreme Court, you rule according to your understanding. There's barely any, even the laws are barely restrictive to the Supreme Court judges, because they can explain the law any way they want. Their ruling is very free. It's like a free-for-all type situation in the Supreme Court. We see many times that they explain the law in a way that fits. Many times, unfortunately, goes according to their hashkafa, to their standing in life. That's how they rule. Also, everyone is right. We're all human, but they have the right to explain the law, the written law, in a way that they feel is what it's telling them. And Professor Menachem Elon, used to base many. I've seen a few Piskei Din of his, a few of his elaborated Piskei Din, where he wrote all the sources of what he based his judgment on. And a lot of his sources are religious sources, are from the Torah. Amazing. When I studied in Chorev, Mordechai Elon, his son, was the Rosh Hashiva, and he used to bring us Piskei Din from his father to show how he used to use the Gemaras we were learning. He used to use the Gemaras and the Rambam and the Rashba and the Shulchan Aruch. He used to use them to base his ruling. And he was always outnumbered in every case that he was, every court case he was in, he was always outnumbered. It was dat hamiyut, because he ruled according to Torah, and it wasn't the norm of the judges. So that position, the way he did it in his private life, the entire way he climbed up and became what he became, was according to Torah. But it's very rare. Most don't get there like that. And to make sure not doing something terribly wrong by being part of the system. Okay, now this was the background. So I'll just mention, now we understand very well this specific bracha. Hashiva Shofteinu Kevarishona. We're asking of Hashem, please return our judges like in the beginning, like at the very beginning of the giving of the Torah, of the ruling of the Jewish way of ruling. Please return them. Those who give us advice, but really it means ruling over us. It should be like in the beginning. That's what we're saying. We want to change the system from the current system that's not according to Torah, change it back to Torah. By the way, there's a few attempts to do so. It's not yet politically, we don't have the constellation politically to do this, but it's definitely in the vision of many people who are involved in all this, and they're trying to push slowly that the country should switch the whole system into the Torah system. It's not, doesn't seem close. That doesn't seem like it can happen so near future, but it will happen in the end. It has to be this way. And therefore, v'aseri menu yagon v'anacha. And by that, remove from us sadness and sighing, because if we're in the wrong system, law system, then we're not being judged according to Torah. So it's not something we're pleased with. It doesn't make us happy. We want to be judged according to Torah. We want to know what the Torah has to say about every case. And then we're happy with the results. This way, by the way, if a person is judged favorably by a civil court, and according to Torah, he should not deserve winning the case, then again, he's holding on to Gezen. He's holding on to non-permissible money because it was given to him not according to Torah.
Well, you want to look for a loophole. You can also your older son.
No, so that's why I said before that the Torah allows writing a will. Why does it allow it?
That's how we understand something. It says straight out that they're looking for the loopholes. It's no different on anything else. Just say I could go to a rabbi. If the rabbi gives me a heter to do something, I could listen to
right, but only if a rabbi gives you the heter. But here, only if the rabbi gives you a heter. But the what?
I don't understand why the will, you can find the loophole, but on
no, because if it's written according to Torah, it's like, where does it say? Mitzvah lekayem divrei hamet. It's a famous saying. Mitzvah lekayem divrei hamet. The famous saying that if a person ordered some way, so the Torah says, then we accept what he wanted to do. But we can't have a judge telling us when it's not written by the, what's that? They can't force. You can't force it. The person who had died can force it upon his offsprings to accept his will. But when he had died without writing a will, and now the judge says, listen, guys, you're not going to get the inheritance. Your sisters are going to get part of it as well. That's forcing upon them something that they don't want to accept, and they don't have to accept because the Torah tells us differently. The Torah says that only boys inherit. I know it's something that's hard to explain. It's very hard to explain. Doesn't matter. Same as we have Mechiras Chametz and we have Mechiras Heter Mechira. It's all according to Torah. Right? Then it's not accepted.
Then the wife could get no money.
Correct.
They could literally fight it out and get all the money.
Correct.
But,
yeah.
So it's all a loophole to be able to live.
But it's according to Torah. It's according to halacha. But that's a difference. Sometimes it's according to Torah. Sometimes there isn't.
All right. And let's say you said like for the Beitin people could be a bunch of people who live in a certain world still and don't think. Do you know how many people get killed by get because they go to a Beitin and the Beitin are people who live in their little babua where women are still back in the 30s? It's common. It's not uncommon. It's the opposite. It is completely
okay. I'm not saying that the entire
loophole because we're trying to save the person. So there's always this.
But even then, it's very dangerous to use civil law for divorcing a woman, because even if they have the strength and the way to get the husband to give it a get, the cruel man to give a get, it doesn't mean the get is kosher, because get mu'useh is not kosher. So we're very lucky. We're very lucky that in Israel, the system doesn't allow the civil courts to divorce women, to use get. Pressure on. Okay, that's okay.
Okay, so
that's
it doesn't
okay.
work alone in its own little circle in today's age. That's exactly
okay, but all those things, all those points you bring up are true, but they're all according to Allah. Same as we have Pruzbul and Heter Mechira and Mechiras Chametz and all that. These are loopholes and Heter Iska, they're all according to Torah. But the moment only if it's according to Torah. If it's just they're judging according to American or British or Ottoman law or German law, unfortunately, I read an article years ago that Shofet Aaron Barak, which was one of the most genius judges who changed the whole system. It's called Akol Shafit. And he changed the whole system in the Jewish court, in the Jewish system of, in the state system of the law. There's an article written that a lot of his understandings of law, come from the German law. Unfortunately, he's a genius, but he had nothing, zero knowledge in Torah. Zero knowledge in Torah. It's so unfortunate. They said in his mind it would have been a Chazon Ish had he been in the yeshivish world. But it's very, very sad that the entire court system today, based on his understanding and his ways of ruling, and all other judges accepted because he was so brilliant, is all based on German law. Why should we in Israel take from such a, not saying today they're cruel, but we know history where they come from. And that should be, instead of our precious Torah that has all the sifim and the Shulchan Aruch, and we can get everything out of it, find all the rulings of Hashem's one desire, and instead of that, switch it by a law that comes from strange places. So this is a point to think of. I know it's a very delicate issue and difficult to accept and to view it this way. But my understanding is that it's a big issue, big problem. Okay, so that's just the first 3 lines of Shiva Shofteinu Kidei Shana. We'll do B'ezrat Hashem the rest next week. By the way, next week will be another last year before Pesach. Then we'll go off for 2 or 3 weeks of vacation. Then we'll come back. But next week we'll be learning as usual. So we'll try to finish next week the bracha. Obviously, based on our study of tribes, so this is a very simple one. Which tribe would you say is a tribe for Mishpat, Hashavat Mishpat? That's very obvious. Shevet Dan. Dan Yadin Amo, Yachad Shivtei Yisrael. Dan Yadin Amo. Dan is to rule, is to judge. Ladun, Beit Din. This is a very obvious one. It's related and connected to Mishpat. Okay. I was going to do just the very last page, very last page of the chapter we're finally finishing today, of Kedima Berachot, of choosing the brachos which bracha to say first and which food to take first for saying the bracha. So we did most of the chapter. Now we're just going to finish the chapter with 2 points that are very interesting. One I heard of quite recently from Rafir Malka himself on a radio show on Thursday evening, and it was a very new point to me. I hadn't realized that this is true, and I find it now in the book. So definitely based, obviously, on the Shulchan Aruch. We've explained that choosing a variety of foods that are of the same bracha, let's say we have a selection of fruits, there are all etz, or a selection of vegetables, all hadam, or a selection of shehakol type foods. So we have the order of choosing zash chanag, you go for shiva saminim, and then whole, and then chaviv, what we like most, and then what's cleaner, and then the size, the larger size. Those are the 5 criteria of choosing which one we should take from the variety of fruits to say Borei Peri Etz over. What happens if a person doesn't know this or forgets, or by mistake takes one of the fruits to say Borei Peri Etz, which is not the one he should have chosen because it's not according to that lineup of criteria. For example, they decided to take something they like best, even though there was Shiva Saminim there that they could have taken from, and they're planning on eating. We said always, only if you're planning on eating all those types of fruits, you have to select the one that's online according to the preference, halakhic preference. So let's say they had a fruit there that they enjoy most, but there was also Shiva Saminim, which they're planning on having. So we said you're supposed to choose the Shiva Saminim before the one you like more, but they chose the one you like more. Does the bracha Berachot etz count for the Shiva Saminim fruit? Or because they skipped over it by mistake, so it's not included in the Berachot etz, even though it's in front of them right now and they're planning on eating it. So the answer is that b'diavad, it does count. Of course it counts, but, and here comes the big chiddush, which I wasn't aware of till recently. The big chiddush is that it counts only if you specifically had in mind, while saying Berachot etz, to include all the other fruits in front of you, or at least you had in mind to eat from the fruits in front of you. But if, let's say, you find a apricot, which you like most, find in the selection, you want to say Berachot etz, and in front of you, you have grapes, you have dates, the Shiva Saminim fruits there also, but you weren't planning, it was in front of you in your eyesight. You see it in front of you, but you weren't planning specifically to eat from the grapes. And suddenly, as you're eating, you have cheshek, you got, decide you want to have some grapes. Then, Berachot etz did not cover the grapes. If it's a lower level food of the sequence of brachas that we said, then it's covered because it's in front of you. Even if you did not have an intent to eat from it specifically or to include it in the bracha, it doesn't matter. As long as it's in front of you, it's automatically included. But if it's a higher level food that should have been used to say the bracha over first, and instead of that, you said the bracha over a lower level food by the sequence of the 5 different categories. And then you suddenly decide to eat from that higher level food, you have to say a new bracha. Big chiddush I never knew of. So if you chose the apricot to say Berachot etz over, there were grapes there, and you didn't have an intent, a clear intent to eat from those grapes. But as you're munching and eating here and there, you decide you want to have a grape, you have to say Berachot etz over the grape. Because why is that? Anything that's there? It's not in front of you. If you have...
You had a smorgasbord, a lot of
right.
You see something, you make an S, but you're making your rounds.
Right.
Station to station.
That's fine. That's fine. Aha, yeah.
So it's the same difference, but you have to make a bracha again also?
That's interesting, because normally Berachot etz would count for everything. Right.
Watermelon, and then you end up going down 2 other tables, and you found all.
Well, that's hadama, so in any way it doesn't cover the 8. What about hadama? It doesn't cover the 8 anyhow, but whatever. Yeah, pears, apples. Okay. And then and then you go for the Shiva Samini, right?
Going to all your dessert tables, you just started with this table. So you have your S.
Right. That's a good question. Normally, anything you have in mind to eat from, not even specifically.
You don't have specific. You have in mind
Right. To eat from
dessert
whatever is there.
table.
Whatever is there. Yeah.
And then you're saying you have to make another bracha.
So originally, before you say the bracha, if you're intending on making your rounds and checking what's there, so originally you should try to search and see if there's Shiva Samini. Aha, so it's more convenient. Yeah, right. For convenience, you want to say. Read it from home so that. Yeah. Right.
You take it one step further. You want to taste it what you're saying, and to see if it's good. Am I going to take a lot, or should I just take one little piece? You make your bracha, you taste it, and then it's relevant. But then you continue on your search, and you end up eating grapes.
Yeah, right.
So according to this, it sounds like you would have to make a bracha.
It wouldn't be included. That's interesting because
I said the answer. Why didn't you watch?
which isn't helpful. No, that's not helpful either because I ate dessert to say anyhow, say a bracha anyhow, right? That doesn't help you either. I would think the language here in the book is הבא המברך על אפרסק, ובא לאכול ענבים, ולא כיוון במפורש לפוטרם, וגם לא הייתה דעתו במפורש לאוכלם. צריך לברך עליהם גם אם מונחים לפניו על השולחן. But I'm not sure because it says גם לא הייתה דעתו במפורש לאוכלם. Here, your mind, you're certain you're going to eat it. You're going to eat from whatever is there, right? From whatever is there. Yeah, right.
You're just saying,
whatever is there, I'm planning on eating. I'm planning on at least searching and seeing what to take from, right? Yeah, I know. Good question. Good question. I had to look this up. I had to look it up. Right. If you say specifically, I'm including any other fruit that's there, whether it's Shiva Saminim or for example, it could also be that a person chooses to take the larger fruit over the one he likes more. That's also wrong. He said the size goes fifth, and what you like more is third. So that's again a problem. If you took someone that's larger or nicer looking, that's the fourth one on line, and then you find something that you like better. To say a bracha again over the one you like better. It's always the one that's on top that we have to say the bracha over again because we chose the wrong one online, and not because the bracha wouldn't work for us, but because we don't want the preferable, more important fruit to be counted in a bracha agav grara, like accidentally almost on the side. You want it to be direct. So if you have in mind directly to have that higher level fruit, and even though you did the wrong thing by saying the bracha over the lower one, it's accepted, counts for you because you had in mind, because you had in mind directly to have it, or to be potter to the bracha. But if it's not distinctly in your mind to eat from it, then it's like derech hagav. It's like on the side, including the more important fruit, and that doesn't work for you. You have to say another bracha. It's a good question if you have in mind in general to eat whatever comes, whatever you find during this meal, and you're not searching right now to see what there is that considered as if you had in mind directly to eat from that food? I have to look that up. Good question. Okay. But by the way, it's only true for 2 out of the 5 components of 5 categories of the lineup we said. Shiva Saminim and Chaviv. But the other 3 criteria of Shalem, whole, and better looking, and size, larger, those 3 aren't serious enough to be counted as not included in a lower level food that you said the bracha over. For example, if you said the bracha over the larger fruit, but there's a cleaner looking one, or one that's whole, that you skipped over, and you said the bracha on the larger fruit that's there, so that does include the better looking one. If that's the only difference between the 2, one is larger and one is better looking, or one is larger and one is whole, it does get included because those are not such important criteria that we can't include them as a matter of fact. But the chaviv, the one you like most, or the Shiva Saminim type, those cannot be included as a matter of fact. Those have to be included directly. You have in mind to include them. or to have in mind to eat from. Okay. This is coming up in Mizonos also, by the way. In any one of the brachos of Shakol, Ha'etz, Adam, Mizonos. For example, if you took out of a selection of cakes, you took a rogala and said Ramin Mizonos over it. And then you find on the table, it was there on the table, but you didn't have direct Havana to have from it, you found the Berachot. And you personally like Berachot much more than you like rogalach in general. So you need to say another Mizonos now, because the Chaviv is the one you should have chosen to begin with. It doesn't matter. That's the problem. Because you didn't notice it was there, so you didn't have in mind directly to include within the bracha Mizonos that Berachot. Oh, that's Hirsi's question. Is that enough? Is that enough to say I'm having in mind to cover everything that's there? Or to be specific that even the Berachot, which is more desirable, I like it more, even so I'm covering it by the Rogala. Which is, by the way, doesn't make sense, because why should you choose the Rogala instead of choosing the Berachot when it's the proper one to choose, because it's third online and not. No, it doesn't matter that time. No. We don't go by that time. We go by in general. So, no, wait 1 second. So Tova is right. If you have a certain reason. No, then it gets, no, that's fine. Then it's included, because we look by, we go by the general liking, not by the specific one right now. Yeah, right. Which you spit out usually, you know? No, joking. You're one of the only people who love herring. Did you see the picture they showed with Reb Chaim Kanevsky's funeral? They showed a picture of a herring cake, a little enlarged, and they showed a picture of all the Haredim standing at the funeral. It looked the exact same, like black dots. All the black dots. It's very funny. They compared the two with black dots. Yeah. Anyway, yes, Tova was saying something very correct. If you have a desire right now to eat something that's more relevant to your palate now because it's sweet, let's say, and you don't want the salty yet, you want it later on, so you're right. Then you can choose to eat the rogala first, even though you like Berachos more in general. Because right now, in the sequence of your meal, it fits more to have that first. But then you should have in mind specifically to include the Berachot in your Berachot Mizonos, and then you're fine. Then you're covered. But if you had the rogalach because you just saw it and decided to eat from it because it's in front of you, and there was a Berachot there as well, but you didn't have specifically in mind to include the Berachot in your Berachot Mizonos, not specifically to have the Berachot in mind, even though it was in front of you, you would need to say Berachot Mizonos again, because you skipped over the Chaviv. Right. Yeah, she's overseas.
And now,
yeah.
There's like no tahalik to follow. That makes sense.
Yeah, I get your point. That's why it was a very.
So much time on things that
I know.
No, you can't.
You can't because of B'chal B'talai.
No, you can't. It's a B'chal B'talai.
Right. And here suddenly we're saying, make more brachos. It's in front of you, and yet it's not included. Yeah, I get this point. That's why it's very new to me as well. It was a very new point to me as well, but what can we do? This is a psak that's written. Yeah, right. Yeah. That it's good for your diet, you're saying that there's so much decision making that you don't eat.
One thing.
Yeah, right. Eat one thing, you don't get stuck. Right.
Then you miss the opportunity to eat from the Shiva. Right, because you don't know.
Right. Okay, so yeah, but the question before if he asked is important to find that. If we have a general intent to eat from everything that's available to us in this meal, is that considered as if we had in mind specifically to have the Shiva Saminim, and then it's included within the bracha that's not Shiva Saminim, or that's not the one we like most in general? Okay, we'll check that one to be sure. Very last point, and then we finish the chapter. Din oreach. There's something special, unique, in general and specifically in this situation. In general, when there's a guest who's eating by someone else's, so we hold that anything the hostess brings out is covered by the bracha, by the guest bracha. If the guest makes a bracha over shehako, because it's the first thing that came out was fish, and they ate the fish shehako. Anything that comes out during the meal, from then on, even if he had no idea what's coming, and it wasn't in front of him, he did not know what to include, it's included, because the guest automatically is dependent on what the hostess brings out. So it automatically includes everything that will come out, even stuff that comes from outside. If, let's say someone brought to that home a cake during the meal, it wasn't even prepared before the meal. Here the hostess had no idea that it's going to come, but the guest has that in mind as well, because he has in mind anything that's going to be served to him. Doesn't matter where it came from and when it came and whatever. Everything. Everything. The moment he makes one bracha that as a guest, the guest means to include anything that's served to him later on. That's automatic. So now, in this situation, this can maybe help us, this halach I'm thinking now, can maybe help us to answer that question, because so the answer, right, so the halacha here is that as a guest, even if you eat a non-Shiva Saminim fruit first, it would cover the Shiva Saminim as well, because you mean to cover direct whatever is there. It's all out there, right? It's not saying that it's not going to surprise you. It's not going to surprise you to read something out. So you go to the other one, right? But it turns out that we find out from here that it's enough to have in mind in general, whatever I'm going to be eating at this meal should be covered by this bracha. And then even if we made a bracha over the non-Shiva Saminim fruit, and comes out to Shiva Saminim fruit, it's covered, because it's as if having direct intent to eat from the Shiva Saminim as well, because we're intending on eating whatever comes out. So we could say the same here. Definitely preferable, if possible, to select the one that's on the higher level. What's that? No. I was saying of the same type foods. No, of course, the same type bracha. No. The mizonos covers all mizonos. The ha'etz, all ha'etz. The shehakol, all shehakol. But normally it doesn't work that way. No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to start with the cake because it's mizonos. We said that the eating habits override the brachas levels. You can eat normally according to the way you normally eat, even if the brachas aren't in order. We allow you to base your meal on what you prefer eating first, second, third. It's just if you have a selection in front of you of different brachos and you're prepared on having all of them and you have no specific preference to start with one of them, then start with the Shiva Saminim and all that. Then go according to order. Okay, so I think this can prove that it's having in mind that whatever the balabait will bring out, is included. That's like specifically having in mind by eating the apricot, the grapes as well. And then they are covered. So if you're at an event some event, and you have in mind to cover everything that's there, that's like specifically covering without even knowing. Yeah, that solves the question. So all we're talking about in the case that's problematic, we'll call it problematic, the one that we figured out newly today, is that if you have in front of you, or not in front of you, it's on a buffet table all around the hall, but you had planned to eat specifically this food, and not everything that's there. This food, that's what you want to reach out and take. That's what you want to eat. And there is in front of you more types of mizonos, more types of shako, more types of ayitz, more types of adama, but you weren't planning on eating. But suddenly, as you're eating, you get tempted to eat from them. Then, even though they're the same bracha, and they were in front of you, which in general covers even if you didn't have specifically in mind to eat from them. Generally, it's covered by the bracha. In this case, it would not be if the food that you hadn't said the bracha over is on a higher level of the 5 categories. It's on a higher level, then it doesn't get included. Then you have to say nu eitz or nu adama or nu mizonos or nu shakol over the one that's on a higher level, only if it's a higher level of chaviv or shiva samini, not the other levels of sequence, because they're not important enough to not be included in the bracha you said. So again, if you chose something that's big, that's large, and there was a nicer looking fruit next to it, and you hadn't had specific intent to have that one as well, and suddenly you want to reach out for that as well, then it is included in the Berei Priya, it's said, over the larger one, which isn't as nice looking. Even though the nicer looking one is on top, should have been first, but it's not enough of an important category. It doesn't categorize it so importantly, that so significantly, that it would not be included in the eights of the lower level fruit you took. Only between chaviv, anything that's less than chaviv and you didn't choose the chaviv, and in the end you want to eat the chaviv, that's not included. And the shiva samini, you didn't choose the shiva samini, but you chose some other type, and then you want to have shiva samini, which you didn't have in mind to begin with, it's not included. Then you have to say a separate prayer. But if you had in mind to eat from all the selection here, you just happen to choose one that's not shiva saminim, and it isn't included, because it's like having in mind to include it. It doesn't have to be specific to the grapes or to the dates or to the pomegranate. It has to be that you had in mind an intent to eat from all the selection that's in the room, not even knowing what's there. That's like oreach. That's like the guest. He doesn't know what's going to come out, and then it's considered included, and then you don't have to say a separate prayer. So, but many times we change our mind. We know what the selection is. We say we don't want to eat from this, we're into that. We just want this. So we eat from that, and suddenly we change our mind. So even though it's in front of us, and normally a bracha covers automatically everything that's in front of us, even if we didn't have in mind to eat from. We change our mind, it's covered, except for this case. This is the only exception, that if it was more chaviv or shiva saminim, and we did not take from it, and we didn't have in mind to eat from it, and then we change our mind, we have to say Berei Priya over again. That's the chiddush we have this year today. Okay, so I see we don't have time for Pesach yet. So next week, Bezat Hashem will do only Pesach. What's that? Adar Gimel, yeah. So next week we'll do only Pesach. We'll do a little bit of Tefillah, and then only Pesach issues. If you have questions, save them for next week for Pesach preparations, and we'll try to answer questions. Yeah. No, that could be a good idea. With that tefillah at all, right? Because we do like half the session of tefillah, and not enough time for Pesach. Good idea. So next week, we'll do only Pesach issues. And if any questions, you want to accumulate questions, try to answer them. And we'll discuss main issues of Pesach. There's so much to do. We need 30 days. It says in the Gemara, 30 days to learn before Pesach. At least one full session of an hour. We should be able to cover a lot of things. Okay, Shavua Tov. Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Call to bye-bye.